Alright, team, so we are back to talk about some Final Fantasy X, which I don't know that we've ever done like a Final Fantasy X dedicated video on this channel outside of discussing the Final Fantasy X and 7 connection theories, of which I've done plenty of videos on. So obviously what we're here to discuss is that Final Fantasy X-3, and I almost want to call it like a hypothetical, a theoretical X-3, but the thing is, it kind of already exists. We've known this for a long time, obviously, with like the audio drama that came out with the HD remasters of X and X-2. We got the Final Fantasy like 2.5 story, and then we obviously got the audio drama of Final Fantasy X Will, which would be presumably like a synopsis for the third game. And then obviously in more recent years and shit, we've had the devs actually talk about how there's a script that Nojima has for a X-3. So it's not even really a thing that may or may not happen. It's more so probably a matter of time, and at least according to what they said in those recent interviews, it wouldn't be until sometime after the remake trilogy is finished, which could be a long time, right? Because we obviously have Rebirth coming out later this year, and however many years it's going to be until the third remake game comes out. So it's probably going to be a while. But what I want to talk about is kind of what do we want from a X-3. Now, I've discussed this a little bit in previous videos. The one that I kind of fall back on always is the prequel story with, Braska, Jecht, and Auron, which I know some people are against that because we already know what sort of happens with that story, but that doesn't mean it still can't be an interesting journey. We get prequels all the time for games, right? Movies, TV shows, games, whatever. You get prequel stories. You kind of know what's going to happen, but there's still a lot of stuff that's unknown, right? We've only seen like flashbacks and like spheres throughout the FF10 and X-2 story that show us what happens during like the Braska journey, but there's still so much unknown, right? But also, even if we know how the story ends, it doesn't mean it can't be a great story to tell, right? Even if we know that by the end, Braska, Auron, and Jecht defeat Sin, and obviously Jecht takes on the mantle of Sin to kind of save the world of Spira, it doesn't mean it can't be a great story. But I also want to see the growth of those characters. I want to learn more about Braska. I've said that before in a recent video, because we don't learn a whole lot about him outside of what people tell us and like the flashbacks and spheres, right? But I also want to see the growth of Auron, because by the time like Final Fantasy X rolls around, he's this legendary guardian that every fucking person knows, right? I want to see that growth for him. But also, of course, the character of Jecht, that's the one where I want to see like the growth and maturity of, because he's this like shitty alcoholic father towards the beginning, right? That is kind of neglectful of his son, it seems, puts him down all the time. And by the end of the Final Fantasy X journey, through the flashbacks and the spheres, we see the growth of him where he quits drinking, he takes the guardianship seriously, and obviously, again, sacrifices his life to save the world. And I would love to see that maturity, that growth of the character, where at the beginning of the game, he'd be this like unlikable asshole. By the end, we'd probably feel really, really sad that he's sacrificing himself to become Sin. I'd love to experience that, I think. But a prequel would also allow us to see like the relationship between Yuna and Braska, which we don't really get to see. Again, we only kind of hear that. We'd also get to see baby Yuna, younger Yuna, right? And potentially younger like Waka and Lulu. I don't remember the time frames of all that. Chapu, who's dead obviously by the time Final Fantasy X happens. Young Kamari. We can also get like flashbacks and stuff from like Jecht's perspective of like remembering his son, remembering Tidus and shit like that, right? And obviously a prequel would let us see younger versions of just kind of all the different characters we experienced on the journey through Final Fantasy X and X-2. So that's obviously a thing there. And while this is something that I would absolutely love and enjoy, I get why people don't necessarily want a prequel because they want a continuation of the story, and this is obviously taking a step back, right? We have this story, we already kind of know what happens with all of it. We don't really need it fleshed out, so to speak, but I just personally like it. And honestly, I never even thought of like a prequel thing with these three characters. I had seen it some time ago, either like on a YouTube video or in like comment sections on YouTube, or I've seen it on Reddit or something along those lines, what people were kind of wanting from like a X-3, right? And I'd never considered a prequel, and I was like, man, that's a pretty damn good idea. Because what we have for the synopsis of like a X-3, which is the Final Fantasy X Will stuff, it's just not that good, in my opinion. In case you never listened to it, it's pretty weird. I know a lot of people point to it sounding like a teen fan fiction sort of thing for the Final Fantasy X world and universe, which it's an audio drama, so there's going to be drama, but you have like Tidus and Yuna like not liking each other anymore. They're kind of broken up, and Yuna either has or is pretending to have a boyfriend because she's jealous of like Tidus with some girl that he's met or is talking to in Bevelle or whatever the case. Tidus had like previously died again after being brought back at the end of Final Fantasy X-2. He like kicks a bomb that's disguised as a blitz ball, blows him up. Yuna brings him back, but he's not the same. Like something's different about him, right? Where he just, that's part of what leads up to them like breaking up or whatever the case. There's also this like weird ability to beckon, as they call it in the story, where you can like bring people back from the farplane, but it's different from like when you go to Guadasalam and you think about a dead relative and you see them appear before you. It's like that, but you're actually bringing them back to life from the farplane. I believe that's what Yuna does to bring back Tidus. And there's also monsters coming back to life, but they're like not, manifestations of the farplane or the Pyreflies or like fiends and shit like they were in like 10 and 10-2 or whatever. Like they're actual living, breathing monsters. You even have stuff come back to life like the Shoepuff, which is by the time like Final Fantasy X Will happens, like the Shoepuff is extinct, but Yuna starts seeing Shoepuffs and shit like that. This also leads into how like Sin comes back, right? That's whatever's bringing shit back is bringing back Sin. But the thing is, all this is kind of unexplained, right? We don't know why tidus is different, right? It's unexplained. We don't know how beckoning came to be, and like if people can beckon and bring people back to life from the farplane, why is that not always a thing? Why is that only just now happening? We don't know why monsters are coming back. That's not explained, or how sin got brought back. That's not explained. That's kind of one of the biggest issues here, besides maybe the narrative itself overall, is there's just a lot not explained, but it's also kind of a short audio drama. They can't explain everything in like 20, 30 minutes, so I guess. Oh yeah, we also have the character of Chuami, and she has a friend named Kurgum, and Chuami is the narrator for Final Fantasy X Will, and she believes that she is Auron's daughter, but I know Lulu doubts that, because I guess apparently a lot of people like claim to be children of like Braska, Auron, and Jack, just because they're like heroes or whatever the case. So, and that's nothing we never get confirmation of, is whether or not she actually is or isn't Auron's daughter. That would obviously be fleshed out if they were to continue this story with 10.3, obviously. We'd have an answer for that, but yeah, apparently Auron has a daughter. And here's the thing, I haven't really listened to 10 Will in a long time, and I just read a kind of quick kind of breakdown or synopsis of what is in that for this video. I don't entirely hate everything. Like, some people are against the idea of Auron having a daughter, right? They feel like it's forced, it comes out of nowhere, and obviously he doesn't ever mention that in like 10 or whatever. But it's not like it's impossible. Obviously, Braska, Auron, and Jack traveled around the world. They would be going to all kinds of different towns, meeting all kinds of different people. It's completely plausible that Auron would have hooked up with some woman at some point and potentially got her pregnant. Like, that's completely feasible, so I don't think that's like that big of a deal. And I don't even necessarily hate like the teeny bop drama shit that people latch onto with 10 Will. Like, there's problems, there's conflict in relationships. There's nothing wrong with Tidus and Yuna having problems, breaking up, getting back together. That is a very human thing to do, right? And the fact that, like, by the end of the story, even though they're broken up and Tidus is, like, injured and can't even barely fight, he still is going after Yuna because she wants to, like, take down Sin or whatever. He's committed to her. He said that he'd be with her till the end. Like, that's some shit I wouldn't mind fucking feeling, right? Because Final Fantasy X, the ending of Final Fantasy X, was the first video game that I can ever recall crying to. Because I spent a long time playing Final Fantasy X. It took me forever to want to finish the story. I wanted to just do everything I could in that game. Try to max out sphere grids and just do everything that there was. And by the time I was like a hardened young teenager, you couldn't make me cry to any goddamn thing. But the end of Final Fantasy X got me at that age. So I wouldn't mind seeing this like heartbreaking story between the two, right? Where they're like indifferent on each other, but he still wants to help her even if he can barely fucking walk or fight or whatever the case. Like, I want to see that. But also don't entirely hate the idea that monsters are back, like, for real. Like, it's not just manifestations of the Pyreflies and shit. Like, we're actually living, breathing monsters and stuff. And that's probably what Sin would be. It wouldn't be a Sin that's, being piloted by Yu Yevon, or a Sin that's being controlled by whatever, right? It's an actual living, breathing Sin that's going around the world potentially destroying stuff. But also, if all these monsters coming back and Sin coming back is because of, like, a bad guy, it makes sense that they'd want to bring Sin back, right? This gigantic monster has been devastating this planet for like thousands of years, and if you have the ability to bring things back to life, like, why wouldn't you do that if you're trying to destroy the world like any bad guy usually does? So I don't entirely hate it now that I've kind of revisited 10 Will. I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch, but if they tweak some stuff here and there, I think it wouldn't be a bad story for Final Fantasy X-3, but it just kind of depends on how things are explained. Like, why is Tidus like not fully Tidus when he gets brought back the second time? But why are monsters coming back permanently? And who has the capability of doing that shit? Who's beckoning Sin back to life? I'm assuming that's what's happening with him. For people that don't really like the teen love drama shit that comes from 10 Will, for one, it's kind of weird because it's a Final Fantasy game. There's always like some sort of love interest or something like that with most of the games. But also, I think people forget how young these characters are. Like, Yuna is 17 and 10. In Final Fantasy X-2, she's 19 years old, and 10 Will takes place, like, I think, like 6 months after 10-2. So she's either 19 or 20 years old. So it makes sense that there'd be this, like, petty love shit where she's jealous of, like, Tidus and some girl in Bavilla. It might be Chuami, I don't remember exactly. And, like, her pretending to have a boyfriend to try to make Tidus jealous. Like, that shit makes sense given their goddamn age. I'm still not fully on board with, like, having to fight Sin again. Like, that doesn't feel, like, super exciting for, like, a 10-3, because we already did that. We did that whole crazy journey having to go inside of Sin and defeat a god and shit. This god tick that's really stupid. I don't really necessarily want to fight Sin again, but I think it makes sense. If some bad guy has the ability to bring back monsters, why would they not bring back Sin? That makes perfect sense, of course. And given that our group defeated Yunalesca in Final Fantasy X, there wouldn't be a final Aeon anymore to help defeat Sin. You just have to, like, physically fight him, and obviously, like, the final Aeon would defeat Sin, and then whoever was the final Aeon would become Sin again. That's obviously wouldn't be a thing, I wouldn't think, anymore because of you having being defeated. But you'd still have to just straight up fight Sin, which would be, I guess, be technically hard. It'd be a little bit different. We probably wouldn't be going inside of Sin to, like, defeat Sin or whatever anymore. We'd just have to, like, fight the gigantic monster, which I guess there could be some interesting aspects there. We did a little bit of that, obviously, in 10. Something else that'd be kind of curious that I'm not sure what they would do is with a 10-3, what would the combat system be? Because we don't presumably have the entire party, unless maybe everybody comes out of retirement to help defeat Sin again. We might have Wakka, Lulu, and Komori and everybody again, potentially. I don't know. But we know for sure we have Tidus, Yuna, Kurgum, and whatever her name is. Chuami? There it is. Fuck. But what kind of combat system would they do? Because 10 and 10-2 are very different, right? 10 was like the last actual traditional turn-based Final Fantasy, at least when it comes to numbered entries and shit, right? Whereas like 10-2 was obviously more of the ATB system, and a lot of people praise it as being maybe the best ATB system, best combat system in the entirety of the franchise. And also it has the dress spheres and be able to change to different dresses or whatever in the middle of combat, which is essentially the old school Final Fantasy with like the job system, being able to switch jobs on the fly. Like, people just really, really praise Final Fantasy X-2's combat system. So I don't know what they do there. They do something new, because obviously modern Final Fantasies are actually more action-based with like 15 and 7 Remake and 16 and stuff like that. Would they want to go that route? I don't know. They could do something that's more ATB or turn-based, and I think that'd be awesome to do because it'd please that kind of old-school fan base. If you're going to come out all these years later and make a 10-3, you got to at least have either 10 or 10-2's combat system. One of those or a blend of both of them, however you do it. It's more or less a video, my dudes. It's some stuff we've discussed before in the past when we've talked about a 10-3 coming out at some point, but I want to go a little more in depth and have just like a full-on discussion about it. Plus, I've never done really, like I said, a 10 video, dedicated video anyways. So I don't know where I fall. I don't know if I want them to do something like 10 Will, or if they want to do something entirely different. Like maybe the script that Nojima has is different from 10 Will, or maybe it's a blend of that has 10 Will elements, but they've completely changed some of the stuff that people didn't like, or is it a prequel stuff, or something brand new entirely that has nothing to do with 10 Will at all. Maybe they scrap that shit. I don't know. But of course, we talked about this before. Pass off to you guys. If a Final Fantasy X-3 is going to happen at some point, what do you personally want to be? Do you want to be a prequel shit? Sequel stuff? You want to pick up where like 10 Will's happening or ending, or something new entirely? Either way, that is the video. Subscribe to me if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.